Sometimes I look back and wonder how I even did it. My life, for so many years, became this quiet, almost sacred devotion to Arthur. His illness just crept in, slowly at first. Then it consumed everything, demanding every ounce of my energy, every waking thought. I became his hands, his memory, his unwavering rock, sacrificing my own small pleasures and grand dreams without a second thought. It wasn't a burden, not really. It was just what we did, what I did, for the man I loved, the man who was my world. There were moments, of course, when the sheer exhaustion threatened to pull me under, but then I'd look at him, so vulnerable, and find another reserve of strength I didn't know I had. Our shared history. It was like a warm blanket I'd pull around myself on the coldest nights. I'd remember the spark in his eyes when we first met, the adventurous trips we took, the quiet evenings curled up with a book, simply enjoying each other's presence. Those memories were my anchors, the proof of a life truly lived, built hand in hand. Even as Arthur's body failed him, and the cruel reality of his prognosis loomed large, I clung to those beautiful recollections, finding a profound sense of purpose in my role as his caregiver. It wasn't just about prolonging his life. It was about honoring the incredible journey we'd shared, the promises we'd made, and the quiet understanding that had always bound us together. Our home, once filled with the lively sounds of a bustling life, now had a different kind of rhythm, a gentle hum of quiet care. Each measured dose of medicine, every carefully prepared meal, the gentle touch on his fevered brow, these were the silent acts of my unwavering commitment. Sure, the isolation could be profound, and sometimes a wave of weariness would wash over me, making my bones ache. But then I'd think about our future, the meticulous plans we'd made, the financial security we'd painstakingly built together, and it would spur me on. I truly believed all these sacrifices were worth it, laying a strong foundation for whatever was to come, a testament to our enduring partnership and the love that I thought was unbreakable. The air in the room just changed one afternoon, a subtle shift that I felt deep in my bones. Arthur's breathing, which had been so labored for so long, softened, almost imperceptibly. I was right there beside him, holding his hand, tracing the lines on his face, whispering every loving word I could think of. It was peaceful, truly, as if he simply drifted off to sleep, and I found a strange, grim comfort in knowing I was with him to the very end. My promise, my vow, had been kept, fulfilled in those last quiet moments. The days that followed were a blur of hushed voices and soft footsteps. Friends and family, they truly rallied around me, their hugs and kind words a much-needed balm for my raw grief. The funeral, though painful, was a beautiful tribute to Arthur's life, and I felt a quiet sense of closure knowing I'd honored him. Amidst the sorrow, a tiny flicker of anticipation began to stir within me. A new chapter, difficult but mine, was finally beginning. I just knew that all the hard work we'd put in, the life we'd built together, would now be mine to navigate, our shared assets securing my future. Looking back, I remember a few times in those final days, Arthur seemed a little distant, more withdrawn than usual, perhaps. But I just chalked it up to the illness, the pain, the sheer exhaustion of it all. Who could blame him? I dismissed any nagging thoughts, focusing instead on his comfort, on being present for him. There was so much going on, so much to manage, and I honestly couldn't imagine anything else taking up his precious last thoughts. Now, with the funeral behind us, the next inevitable step was approaching, the reading of the will, a moment I believed would simply confirm what I already knew was rightfully ours. The lawyer's office felt strangely hushed, almost reverent as I sat there, my heart a mix of lingering grief and quiet anticipation. I expected a solemn formality, a confirmation of what I already knew, that Arthur and I, as partners in life and love, had built a future together, and now it was simply being made official. The air was thick with unspoken condolences, a respectful silence. But then, Mr. Henderson, with his crisp suit and even crisper voice, cleared his throat, and the words that followed hit me like a physical blow, each one a hammer strike against my already fragile composure. "According to Mr. Arthur's last will and testament," he began, his voice devoid of emotion, "all of his substantial assets, the family home, savings, investments, everything, are to be bequeathed to Ms. Sarah Jenkins." My breath hitched. Sarah? Who on earth was Sarah? The name hung in the air, a foreign, unwelcome sound that echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. I must have misheard, surely. My mind raced, searching for any Sarah I knew, any acquaintance, any distant relative. Nothing. The confusion was quickly overtaken by a searing wave of disbelief, then a cold, creeping horror. This couldn't be right. This simply wasn't possible. The pain that followed wasn't just grief. It was a profound, gut-wrenching betrayal, cutting deeper than Arthur's death itself. My world, already teetering on the brink, crumbled beneath my feet. Years of sacrifice, of unwavering care, of putting my own life on hold, flashed before my eyes, culminating in this unbearable injustice. The lawyer continued to speak, offering a few cryptic details about this Sarah, mentioning an address, a date, but his words blurred into an incomprehensible drone. All I could feel was the icy grip of treachery, the devastating realization that the man I had loved and cared for so deeply had harbored such an unimaginable secret, leaving me with nothing but shattered trust and a gaping void. The initial shock, the raw disbelief, slowly began to morph into a searing, cold anger. My grief for Arthur was still there, a dull ache, but it was now overshadowed by a burning need for answers. Who was Sarah? How could Arthur, the man I'd shared my life with, the man I'd selflessly cared for, have kept such a monumental secret? I felt a desperate urgency to peel back the layers of his deception, to understand the betrayal that had just shattered my entire world. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every waking moment was consumed by this relentless, furious quest for the truth. I started digging, turning our familiar home into a crime scene. Every corner a potential clue. Old papers, financial statements, even the dusty boxes in the attic. Nothing was sacred. I found a hidden compartment in his old desk, and inside, a small, worn, leather-bound diary, not his usual organized planner. Flipping through it, my hands trembling, I discovered cryptic notes, dates, and then, unmistakably, Sarah's name, scrawled repeatedly, sometimes alongside travel itineraries and subtle financial discrepancies that now screamed out at me. The realization that this affair had been going on for years, right under my nose, twisted my gut into knots. How could I have been so blind? I even started discreetly reaching out to some mutual friends, subtly probing, watching their reactions, searching for any flicker of recognition or discomfort when I mentioned the will, or even just Arthur's later habits. A few conversations, seemingly innocent at the time, now replayed in my mind with sinister new meanings. The long absences, the vague excuses, the times he seemed just a little too busy, all the subtle signs I'd dismissed as illness-related or just Arthur being Arthur, suddenly coalesced into a horrifying picture of a carefully constructed double life. My shock was now replaced by a chilling, determined rage, solidifying my resolve to expose every single one of his lies, no matter how painful the truth might be. After weeks of relentless digging, the puzzle pieces finally clicked into place, forming a complete, ugly picture of Arthur's deceit. The anger I felt was still very much present, a simmering fire, but it was now tempered by a surprising clarity. I realized that confronting Sarah directly in a dramatic shouting match wouldn't serve me. I needed a different kind of vindication. My focus shifted from emotional outbursts to a more calculated approach, one that would expose the truth and reclaim my dignity without descending into chaos. I knew my fight wasn't just about money. It was about honoring the years I'd given, about proving that his betrayal wouldn't break me.
Never underestimate a quiet sister who works in real estate. My brother Marcus learned this lesson the hard way when he tried to steal our family home, not realizing I'd been planning something much bigger all along. I'm Julia Walker, 34 years old, and this is the story of how my brother's greed led me to buy not just our family home, but every house on Maple Avenue. Growing up on Maple Avenue was like living in a storybook. Our parents had bought the old Victorian at number 23 before either of us were born, pouring their hearts into restoring it to its former glory. Mom would always say that houses have souls, and if you listen carefully, they'll tell you their stories. Marcus never listened. He was too busy dreaming about how much the property would be worth once the neighborhood improved. Even as kids, he'd talk about selling the house and building luxury condos. Mom would just shake her head and say, "Some things are worth more than money." I followed in Mom's footsteps, becoming a real estate agent but specializing in historic properties. Marcus went into finance, always chasing the next big deal. We were different that way. I saw homes where he saw dollar signs. When Mom and Dad retired to Florida 3 years ago, they left the house to both of us, with the understanding that we'd preserve it. "This house has been in our family for 30 years, Dad said. Take care of it, and it'll take care of you." For a while, things were fine. I lived in the house, maintaining it and even doing some restoration work, while Marcus lived in his downtown condo. He'd stop by occasionally, usually to complain about how I was wasting the property's potential. "We could sell this place for millions if you'd just let me develop it," he'd say, eyeing the original woodwork like it was kindling. "This whole street is ripe for redevelopment." What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been thinking about the street too, but in a very different way. Working in real estate, I'd noticed a troubling pattern. Developers were buying up historic homes in the area, tearing them down, and replacing them with cheaply built luxury condos that sat half-empty. Maple Avenue was one of the last intact historic streets in the city. Every house had a story, from old Mrs. Henderson's Queen and at number 15 where she'd raised 3 generations of her family, to the Craftsman Bungalow at number 31 where the local art teacher gave free lessons to neighborhood kids. I started making plans, quietly approaching homeowners about their future intentions. Many were worried about developers pressuring them to sell. I began connecting them with historic preservation resources, helping them understand their options. Then Mom had her stroke. It wasn't severe, but it meant expensive medical bills. Dad called, worried about how they'd manage. Before I could even suggest a solution, Marcus swooped in with his brilliant idea. "We'll sell the house," he announced during a family video call. "It's the perfect time, property values are sky high." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Mom and Dad trusted us to preserve it. They trusted us to take care of it," Marcus countered. "And right now, taking care of it means selling it to help them. Unless you've got a better idea?" I did have a better idea. I'd been saving for years, living modestly and investing carefully. "I'll buy out your half," I offered. "You'll get market value, and the house stays in the family." Marcus laughed. "Why would I sell to you when I've got developers offering triple the market rate?" That's when I realized he'd already been talking to developers. My own brother had been planning to sell our family home out from under me. I tried reasoning with him. I showed him the historic preservation grants I'd found, the tax benefits of maintaining the property's historic status, but Marcus had dollar signs in his eyes and wouldn't listen. Then came the morning I returned from visiting Mom and Dad in Florida to find the locks changed on our family home. Marcus was waiting in the driveway, smirking. "Sorry, sis, I bought out Mom and Dad's interest while you were gone. The house is mine now, and these developers don't want any complications with their plans." "You can't do this," I protested. "We co-own the house." "Check again," he said. waving a stack of papers. Mom and Dad signed over their rights to me. I've already filed the paperwork. It's all mine now. I stood there, staring at our family home, the porch where we'd spent summer evenings, the window seat where I used to read, the garden Mom had lovingly tended. Marcus had manipulated our parents when they were vulnerable, all for a quick profit. "Get your stuff out by the end of the week," he called over his shoulder as he left. "The demolition crew starts next month." What Marcus didn't know was that while he'd been plotting to sell our family home, I'd been working on something much bigger. Remember those conversations I'd been having with the neighbors? Over the past year, I'd been quietly helping them set up a neighborhood historical preservation association. We'd secured grants, arranged favorable financing, and created a comprehensive plan to protect the entire street. And I'd done something else too, something I'd been planning for months before Marcus showed his true colors. I'd bought options on every house on Maple Avenue. Working in real estate has its advantages. I knew which homeowners were thinking of selling, who needed help with repairs, who was worried about developers. One by one, I'd approached them with a simple proposition. I'd give them the market rate for an option to buy their homes, with the guarantee that the houses would be preserved, not demolished. Most of them jumped at the chance. They loved their homes and wanted to see them protected. The options were structured so that I'd only need to exercise them if there was a credible threat to the street's historic character. Like, say, a developer trying to tear down our family home to build condos. The moment Marcus changed those locks, I put my plan into action. I exercised the options, using a combination of my savings, historic preservation grants, and a consortium of investors who shared my vision for protecting historic neighborhoods. Within a week, I owned every house on Maple Avenue, all 15 of them. Then I waited. Marcus spent the next few weeks strutting around, bragging to anyone who would listen about the luxury condos that would soon replace our family home. He even hosted a meeting for potential investors right there on our front porch. That's when I made my move. I arranged a neighborhood meeting at old Mrs. Henderson's house, the biggest one on the street. I made sure Marcus got an invitation, though I knew he'd only come to gloat about his development plans. The meeting room was packed when he arrived. All the neighbors were there, along with representatives from the Historical Society and several real estate developers who'd been pressuring people to sell. Marcus stood up, waving his ownership papers. "As the new owner of number 23, I think it's time this street entered the modern era. My development group has plans that will increase property values for everyone." "Actually," I interrupted, standing up, "I don't think those plans will work." "This doesn't concern you anymore," Marcus snapped. "You don't even live here now." "Oh, but it does concern me," I smiled. "You see, as the owner of every other house on Maple Avenue, I have some thoughts about the neighborhood's future." The room went silent. Marcus's face went from smug to confused to shocked in the span of about 3 seconds. "What do you mean, owner?" he stammered. I nodded to my lawyer, who started passing out packets to everyone in the room. "These documents show the deeds for all 15 properties on Maple Avenue, excluding number 23. They were purchased last week by the Maple Avenue Historical Trust, of which I am the sole trustee." Marcus grabbed a packet, flipping through it frantically. "This is impossible. You can't afford this." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "It turns out that when you live modestly, invest wisely, and have a deep understanding of real estate markets and historic preservation grants, you can accomplish quite a lot. And when you treat people with respect instead of seeing them as obstacles to profit, they're often happy to work with you." One of the developers Marcus had been working with stood up. "This changes nothing. We'll still build on number 23. One holdout won't stop progress." I smiled again. "You might want to read the last page of that packet. The entire street has been designated as a historic district. Any new construction must conform to strict preservation guidelines. Good luck fitting luxury condos into those parameters." Marcus slumped in his chair, his development dreams crumbling before his eyes. "You planned this," he accused. "You knew I was going to buy the house." "No," I corrected him. I planned this because I loved this street and wanted to protect it. Your betrayal just moved up my timeline a bit. The meeting continued, but Marcus didn't stay to hear about our plans for restoration and community development. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle Mrs. Henderson's antique chandelier. Over the next few months, an interesting thing happened. Marcus tried everything to get his development approved: bribes, legal challenges, even attempting to have the historic designation overturned. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, I implemented the plans I'd been developing all along. We started a community land trust to ensure long-term affordability. We established a fund for home repairs and restoration. We even created a program to help first-time homebuyers purchase and maintain historic properties. The house at number 23, our family home, sat empty. Marcus couldn't develop it, but his pride wouldn't let him sell it back to me either. He was stuck paying property taxes and maintenance costs on a house he couldn't use or develop. Then Mom and Dad found out what he'd done. "You manipulated us when we were worried about medical bills?" Mom's voice could have frozen fire. "You used our concern for our health care to steal your sister's home?" Dad was even more direct. "Fix this, Marcus. Fix it now." 2 days later, Marcus's lawyer contacted me. He was willing to sell the house at cost, no profit. I bought it. Of course, it needed some work after sitting empty, but that was okay. Houses have souls, Mom always said, and this one just needed some love to come back to life. Today, Maple Avenue is thriving. The historic district designation attracted heritage tourism. Small businesses opened in some of the converted carriage houses. Property values have actually increased more than they would have with Marcus's condo development. It turns out people will pay a premium to live in a preserved historic neighborhood. Marcus? He's still in real estate development, but his reputation took a hit when the story got out. Turns out, trying to steal your sister's house and demolish a historic neighborhood doesn't play well in the local business community. Mom recovered from her stroke, and she and Dad moved back to the area, into the Craftsman bungalow at number 31. As it happens, the art teacher who lived there was ready to retire, and she loved the idea of the house going to someone who would appreciate its history. Last week, I was sitting on my front porch, the same porch where Marcus had once bragged about his development plans, when a young couple walked by with their realtor. They were looking at the house at number 27, which one of our original neighbors had decided to sell. "This street is amazing," I overheard the woman say. "It's like stepping back in time, but in a good way. How did it survive when so many other historic neighborhoods were developed?" The realtor smiled. "That's quite a story, actually. It all started with a sister who loved her family home. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I had work to do. The Historical Society was meeting to discuss restoration grants for the next year, and I needed to review the applications. But as I walked inside, I patted the old newel post at the bottom of the stairs, the one Marcus had wanted to tear out because it wasn't modern enough. Mom was right, houses do have souls, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, they don't just tell you their stories. They help you write new ones. Marcus still drives by occasionally, looking at what could have been his big development project. Last month, Maple Avenue was featured in a national magazine's Best Preserved Historic Streets in America article. I made sure to send him a copy. The neighborhood has become exactly what I hoped it would be: a living museum of architectural history, but also a vibrant community where families can grow and create their own stories. Every house has its own character, its own voice, its own contribution to the street's harmony. And our family home? It's still here, still standing proud at number 23, Maple Avenue. The porch still welcomes visitors on summer evenings. The window seat still catches the morning sun just right for reading. And Mom's garden? Well, let's just say the roses have never bloomed better. Some things really are worth more than money. Marcus never understood that, but that's okay. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about preserving what matters, protecting what's precious, and proving that there's more than one way to measure success. Besides, owning an entire street isn't bad either. Some people show their true colors when they think you're not watching. In my case, it took being in a coma for my husband's family to reveal just how far they'd go for money, but they didn't know that I'd already seen through their masks long ago. I'm Sophia Bennett, 35 years old, and this is the story of how my husband's family tried to steal my inheritance while I was fighting for my life and how their greed led to their own downfall. My parents were self-made millionaires who never forgot their humble beginnings. They built their fortune through hard work and smart investments, but what they really built was a legacy of giving back. Growing up, they taught me that money was a tool for helping others, not a measure of worth. Remember, sweetheart, my father would say, wealth without purpose is just numbers in a bank account. It's what you do with it that matters. I met my husband Andrew at a charity gala 5 years ago. He seemed different from the other trust fund kids I'd grown up around. He was working as a public defender, seemingly more interested in justice than luxury. I fell in love with his apparent dedication to helping others. His family was another story. My mother-in-law Margaret was obsessed with maintaining appearances, constantly dropping hints about their old money background. My father-in-law Richard spent most of his time at his country club, complaining about taxes. And Andrew's sister Victoria, well, she never tried to hide her interest in my family's wealth. It must be nice, she'd say during family dinners, having so much money just handed to you. Some of us have to work for a living. What she didn't know was that I'd been working since I was 16, starting in my parents' company mailroom and working my way up. The fact that my parents were wealthy didn't mean I got a free ride, it meant I had to work twice as hard to prove myself. Last year, my parents died in a plane crash. It was devastating, not just personally but for all the charitable projects they'd been involved with. They left me their entire estate, approximately $7 million in liquid assets, plus various properties and business interests. That's when I started noticing changes in Andrew and his family. Suddenly, Victoria was my best friend, always wanting to go shopping or have lunch. Margaret started calling me darling and including me in her country club activities. Richard began asking for my opinion on investment opportunities. And Andrew, he started talking about quitting his public defender job, about how we could do more good with my inheritance than by defending one client at a time. I wasn't fooled. I'd seen this behavior before, people changing when they smell money, so I made some quiet arrangements, following my parents' example of careful planning and strategic thinking. Then came the accident. I was driving home from a late meeting with my parents' foundation trustees when a drunk driver ran a red light. The doctors later told me I was technically dead for 2 minutes before they brought me back. I slipped into a coma that would last for 3 weeks. What I didn't know then was that Andrew and his family wasted no time putting their plan into action. They thought they had the perfect opportunity. I was unconscious. The inheritance was still being processed, and Andrew had power of attorney as my husband. They forged documents. They falsified signatures. They even hired actors to impersonate me in video calls with banks and lawyers, all to transfer my inheritance into accounts they controlled. What they didn't know was that 2 days before my accident, I'd already executed my own plan. I woke up to Andrew holding my hand, tears in his eyes. Darling, he said, I have some bad news about the inheritance. I waited to hear what story he'd tell me. There were some complications with the estate. The lawyers say there might have been some mismanagement. The assets, they're gone. I watched his face carefully. He was trying to look devastated, but there was a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Gone? I whispered, my voice hoarse from weeks of disuse. We've transferred everything we could salvage, he said. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. Victoria knows some excellent financial advisors. That's when I pressed the call button for my nurse. She came in quickly, followed by my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, who'd been waiting outside. Perfect timing, I said. I think it's time we discussed what really happened to my inheritance. Andrew's face went pale. What do you mean? Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mrs. Bennett, he said formally, would you like me to explain what happened to your estate while you were unconscious? Please do, I nodded. I'm sure my husband would be very interested to hear about all the forged documents and fake video calls. Andrew jumped up. That's ridiculous. You can't prove. Actually, Mr. Harrison interrupted, we can prove everything. Your sister Victoria isn't as clever with technology as she thinks. She left quite a trail of evidence when she hired those actors, not to mention the rather obvious forgeries of Mrs. Bennet's signature. But the money, Andrew sputtered. The accounts are empty. Yes, I said quietly, they are, because 2 days before my accident, I donated my entire inheritance to the Bennett Foundation for Children's Education, every penny of it. The silence in the room was deafening. You, what? Andrew whispered. The foundation my parents started, I explained. I transferred everything to it, with strict controls and oversight. The paperwork was filed and confirmed before the accident, so all those accounts you tried to steal from, they were already empty. The money is being used to build schools in underprivileged areas, fund scholarships, and support education initiatives worldwide. But, that was our money, Victoria burst out from the doorway. I hadn't even noticed her and their parents arriving. No, I said firmly, it was never your money. It was a responsibility my parents entrusted to me, and I honored their legacy the way they would have wanted. You can't do this, Margaret declared. Andrew is your husband. He has rights. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Actually, about that, he pulled out another document. Mrs. Bennett also instructed me to file these papers as soon as she regained consciousness. Andrew grabbed the papers, his face growing even paler. Divorce papers? You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, I said, and before you think about contesting anything, you should know that we have complete documentation of your attempted fraud. Would you like to see the video footage of Victoria hiring those actors? Or perhaps the evidence of your father's meetings with that shady financial advisor who helped you forge the documents? Richard, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Now see here, we can work something out. No, I cut him off. We can't. What we can do is this, you all leave now, quietly, and never contact me again. The foundation's lawyers won't pursue criminal charges for your attempted fraud, but if you try to contest the divorce or make any claims on my assets, everything we have goes straight to the district attorney. You planned this, Andrew accused. You never trusted us. No, I corrected him. I gave you every chance to prove you were the person I thought you married. You chose to show me who you really are instead. I just made sure there would be consequences for that choice. They left eventually, Margaret in tears, Victoria cursing under her breath, Richard looking shell-shocked. Andrew lingered at the door. I did love you, he said quietly. Maybe, I replied, but you loved money more. Goodbye, Andrew. The aftermath was surprisingly peaceful. The divorce went through without contest. They couldn't fight it without risking criminal charges. The Bennett Foundation flourished, funding educational programs that would have made my parents proud. Victoria tried to spin a story in their social circle about me being mentally unstable and making rash decisions, but it backfired when the Foundation's first annual report was published, showing exactly how the money was being used to help thousands of children get better education opportunities. Andrew went back to his public defender job, though I heard he had trouble explaining to his colleagues why his lifestyle suddenly changed so dramatically. Margaret had to downgrade her country club membership. Richard's golf buddies stopped inviting him to invest in their business ventures. Me? I focused on running the foundation, carrying on my parents' legacy of making a real difference in the world. The doctors said my recovery from the coma was remarkable, maybe because I had a purpose pushing me forward. Last week, I received an invitation to a charity gala. The host? A young man who'd received one of the foundation's first scholarships, now a successful entrepreneur giving back to his community. The invitation came with a note. Your parents' legacy, and your wisdom in protecting it, changed my life and the lives of countless others. Thank you for seeing the true value of inheritance. I thought about Andrew and his family, about how they saw $7 million as a ticket to a luxury lifestyle. They never understood that the real inheritance wasn't the money, it was the opportunity to make a difference. The foundation now helps over 10,000 students annually. We've built 15 schools, established hundreds of scholarships, and created educational programs that will impact generations to come. The initial $7 million has grown through careful management and additional donations from people inspired by our mission. Sometimes I wonder if Andrew and his family ever realized what they really lost, not the money they tried to steal, but the chance to be part of something meaningful, something bigger than themselves. Last month, I saw Victoria at a coffee shop. She was complaining loudly about how hard it is to find good help these days. I sat quietly at my table, reading through scholarship applications from bright young students eager for a chance to learn and grow. One of those applications was from a girl whose single mother works as a housekeeper at the country club where Margaret used to be a member. The girl wants to study computer science and develop educational software for children with learning disabilities. She has the grades, the drive, and now, thanks to the foundation, she'll have the opportunity. That's the thing about karma, sometimes it does more than just punish the guilty. Sometimes it takes their bad intentions and turns them into something beautiful. My parents would have loved that. The doctors say the coma could have killed me. Instead, it gave me a chance to see people's true colors and ensure that my parents' legacy would be protected and used the way they would have wanted. Andrew still sends the occasional email, usually when he's had too much to drink, talking about how we could work things out. I never respond. The foundation's quarterly reports, publicly available online, are all the response needed. Margaret tried to join the foundation's board of directors last year, claiming she wanted to help guide the family legacy. Her application was politely declined. The board is made up of educators, community leaders, and former scholarship recipients, people who understand that true wealth isn't about taking, but giving. Victoria started her own charitable foundation recently. Last I heard, it had hosted 3 fashion shows and donated a total of $500 to actual causes. Meanwhile, the Bennett Foundation has expanded to 3 continents and partnered with major educational institutions worldwide. The drunk driver who caused my accident made a full recovery and served time for his actions. Upon his release, he asked to speak at one of our foundation's events about the consequences of poor choices. His honesty and remorse were a stark contrast to my former in-laws' persistent denial of their actions. Richard still tells people at his country club that I was confused after the coma and made irrational decisions. The irony is that my decision to protect my inheritance was made with perfect clarity before the accident ever happened. I saw what they were becoming and chose to act before they had the chance. The foundation's office has a wall of photos, students graduating, new schools opening, lives being changed. Next to it hangs a simple quote from my father: "Wealth without purpose is just numbers in a bank account. It's what you do with it that matters." I think about that quote every time I hear about Andrew and his family's continued attempts to maintain their facade of prosperity. They thought $7 million would solve all their problems. They never understood that money without meaning only creates more emptiness. My parents left me more than money, they left me wisdom, values, and a vision of how wealth could be used to make the world better. Their real legacy isn't in bank accounts or property deeds. It's in the thousands of lives being improved every day through education and opportunity. And that's something no one can forge papers to steal.